and the church website. If you have an announcement for Sunday worship regarding church ministry or committee business, please submit it no later than Friday to Maggie Reister. Her email address, sorry, that word just flew out of my brain. Email address will be made available in the chat as we go on. Before we do move on to worship, I would like to make a short announcement with regard to our search for a full-time minister. The search committee has been meeting since the last year. A year ago this time, we were in the process of getting ready to interview a candidate for the position of three-quarter time minister serving our church. And then as we were interviewing the person, the world shut down for the pandemic, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So in the last year, we've been doing quite a bit of work. That particular candidate did not choose to join us in church, which is sad to many of us who are involved in the process. So we have gone back into search for a UUA minister to serve us full time. Again, the pandemic has struck us and has made the search for a full-time minister not impossible, but difficult. And the search committee has recommended and the board has approved to go to a contract to call ministry, which will allow us to have a full-time minister who will be on a contract basis and which will have, instead of Zoom interface with a potential candidate, will have the equivalent of, as the UUA coach has told me, the equivalent of a year-long interview process with a minister who we can then call at the end of the year, if we so wish. The search team is very excited about this, and we're about to begin getting names for people who might be interested in us. It's been a little delay in us getting started on this process, and again, I don't want to blame the pandemic, but the pandemic has made everything a little more interesting this year. So that's my update as the chair of the search team. And if you have any questions, please feel free. I'll put my email in the chat box as well. And if you have questions specifically around ministry, I see Janet had a question about settled, and it begins with contract. We are being very clear with the candidates that we are looking for settled ministry. And that the reason we're doing this different process is specifically with regard to wanting to know the person through some form of interchange that is not Zoom related, not hiring somebody from a Zoom call, which is basically what the settled ministry process is at this time. And our coach has assured us that many churches are doing this process. So I don't want to take any more time here. Thank you for your questions. Again, I'll put my email in the chat bar. So if you have specific questions, I can answer them. You can also ask Pete O'Day and Stephanie Dowell and Carla Banks if you have any specific questions around the search. Thank you for allowing me to give you this information as quickly as I just did. And I'm going to invite you now to join me in taking a rather large, deep breath and join us in the spirit of reverence as we listen to our prelude. Thank you. Will you now join us in as we light the chalice? The words will be shown on your screen. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. Our opening words today are from number 567 in the back of the hymnal. I will read the words that are bold, and then Jeff Keim will lead you all in the italicized words. So join Jeff when he is reading. I want to be with people who submerge in the task,
who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along,
who stand in the line and haul in their places,
who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out.
The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust.
But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident.
Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used.
The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Please join with us now as we sing the hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
You join us now as we state the affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now we'll have a time where we'll all be unmuted for a few seconds so we can say a good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning, everyone.
Good to
Good morning.
see all of
Good
you.
morning.
Hi, Jeff.
Dick, that was beautiful.
Yes, thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Now is the time in our service where we take a moment to share joys and concerns which we have had in the previous weeks. We believe that a joy shared is multiplied and a burden shared is lessened. As the music plays, you can type your joys and concerns in the chat box. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here to talk this morning on what I originally titled this as what is the vision of our beloved community? I'll address that word vision here in a minute. But I have another reading I want to start off with. I had originally intended this to be either one of the opening or closing words, but in my process of preparing and sending in the order, I forgot this one and then I ran across it. So this is number 580 in the back of our hymnal. It's called The Task of the Religious Community by Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, who's someone that had the opportunity to meet a couple of times when Tina was working at Meadville Lombard Theological School. Begins, the central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see that all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. So before I begin digging into this service, I'm going to retitle the name of this sermon, and I do it with caution because I remember I did that for a Burning Bowl service a few years ago, and I got some feedback that people were really looking forward to that service. And not only did I retitle this service, but I actually didn't do the Burning Bowl thing. So, but the content's going to be the same, but the words I'm going to use are going to be a little bit different. I'm going to retitle this service, Imagining the Future of Our Beloved Community. I do this to honor our evolving efforts to be all-inclusive and not to use ableist language. I hadn't even thought about the word vision as being an ableist word. but it does exclude those who may be blind or have challenges of seeing clearly, just like our old standing on the side of love was changed to side of love. I'm sure many of you recall Reverend Ashley Horan, who served our congregation way back as a part-time director of religious education. And she was also one of the leaders of our Beloved Conversations, especially that weekend event that we did. So I'm Facebook friends with her, and I recently read a Facebook post of her asking for suggestions from her friends. As you can imagine, being a minister, she has lots of ministers as friends. And some of the suggestions for the words or phrases to replace the ableist word vision were very good. The one that settled with me was imagining the future. So that's why I've changed the name of this. So imagining the future, and I'll use that a couple other times. If some of you think that's a little bit too PC, well, that's part of what we do. That's part of who are we becoming as we learn about ourselves, about those around us, and about who we are and who we really want to be. So I hope no one's offended by that language, but I think that's just who we are. My goal today is to share with you portions of the report provided to us last October by Reverend Patrick Price, who I think most of you recall that he was our most recent past minister. This report is something that's required. It lays out what Reverend Price and our board of trustees agreed to in his contract, outlines suggestions about how we could move forward imagining the future of our congregation. I share the information in the report so that we can all learn from the observations and use them to build on our future. I'll share some of my perspectives on the subject from my current role as Finance Committee Chairperson and a 20+ year member of the congregation. Now, I haven't purposely went out and talked to a lot of people about the report, but I did attend a board meeting a few months ago, and where that subject came up, and we actively engaged in the conversation about the contents and what does it mean and what we should do with it. I think Reverend Price does a good job of summarizing our strengths and opportunities and also identifies some of our challenges. My intent today is to share the information with you and to get you to start thinking about what it might mean for our future and prepare us to have conversations together, hopefully soon, one of these months, together in within our a church space, our sanctuary or the social hall. But that's not today and probably won't be anytime soon. Whenever an interim minister is hired, goals are mutually established with the minister and church leadership to accomplish during the course of the contract. And it is a contract, and there's lots of things outlined in the contract. The key goals specified with Patrick were: 1, to prepare the congregation for a settled minister in all aspects, in worship style and what it may look like under a settled minister, in funding and how to streamline our pledging process, and in pastoral care, if not as the lead, at least as a coordinator of such endeavors. Other goals including working together in assessing our organizational structures and in organizing our efforts more effectively, partnering together in supporting our shared ministry, and committing to regular ongoing assessment of our programs towards these goals. Those are some very aspirational goals in a short time to accomplish. One of the reasons why the board and Patrick agreed it was as aspirational is that there was 3 things in place when Patrick started. First of all, he started kind of late. He started in October of 2019, which is usually a little late for a contract minister to start. You'd like to have him in place in like August. And he was contracted to only be with us through June 20th. It was also only a half-time position. And it was also a challenge in that Reverend Price lived an hour and a half away from us in Hobart. He was over in, I believe it was St. Charles, Illinois. So, and then, as we all know well by now, a surprise challenge for achieving the goals was thrown in when the COVID epidemic hit midway through the 6 month of the time Patrick was scheduled to be with us. So we know it was about this time of year, February, March, we started hearing about it. So the assessment that he is asked to do, excuse me, is in the form, sorry, let me get a quick drink here if I may. The assessment is in the form of a questionnaire centered around the previously mentioned goals. Now, I don't have enough time to dig in. It's about a 4-page report, 4 full pages, but somehow I managed to do about a 9-page service on this, but it's big font. So, but I'm not just reading the report. I'll try to highlight some of the things, the most important questions that were raised and Patrick's response to them. But before I do that, I want to mention that there was some behind the scenes work that was done with the staff and their job descriptions, and also with the worship team. Patrick attended most of our meetings, even having to do a few via phone at that time because we weren't even doing Zoom, about streamlining our services. And then once the pandemic hit, he helped us with figuring out how to do virtual service. After his time was up in June, I think it was, I can't remember, it was August or September, we also asked him to help us with a worship team retreat. So, and that was very helpful, done over Zoom, of course. So the first question was to assess the congregation's work towards engaging and acknowledging its griefs and conflicts. So what are griefs and conflicts? Things where there are sides, maybe there are lines drawn where there's people that are going to be for, people that are going to be against. But there were actually a few instances that Patrick was aware of that he mentioned. One was a split of the congregation in the 1970s. He was informed of that history. Another, which was more recent, was the removal of the flag from the sanctuary to the social hall. Initially, it was sent out to be cleaned, as it was something that hadn't been addressed for several years. And then when it was brought back, instead of being put in the sanctuary, it was put in the social hall. As you can probably remember or imagine, it generated a lot of conversation about, you know, should it be in the social hall? Should it be back in the sanctuary? And that those conversations were fairly lively. So Patrick scheduled a meeting in the sanctuary after one of our Sunday services. It was a very well attended meeting. Regarding the flag, it was civil and all felt that they were heard. He did a very good job of managing that conversation. There was really some overt concern that this issue would split the church and create discord, just like the historic rupture in the 70s. It was pointed out that this is nothing like that. It wasn't that big of an issue, and that efforts to invoke that conflict could be seen as emotional blackmail in this situation. The flag has now stayed in its new location in the social hall, but there are longtime members still voicing a desire to return it to the sanctuary. And that was mostly from Patrick's things. I would add that the ability, a summary on my own, again, my perspective, the inability to attend services in the sanctuary may have put this issue to rest, but I wonder if everyone would agree with that assessment. Patrick also noted that other losses and griefs over ministerial transitions are willingly discussed by individuals and leaders, but not in a public or collective way. I think that's a way of saying that you know, there are probably some unresolved issues within our congregations. These losses or transitions are in large part the basis for the desire of having a settled, full-time, locally cited minister. The assessment of this topic by Reverend Price, from my perspective, says we have a lot of work to do in the area of maintaining right relations during time of conflict. I think we end up with 3 groups whenever conflict arises. There are those that are for a position, those that are against, and those who just don't want to talk about it because of fear that it will split the congregation. And we saw that in the conversation about the flag. We've seen it multiple times over the years. People leave, people pull back for a while, or maybe just start ignoring one another. Some of you may say I'm wrong on this point, and that's okay. But I think there are some that would agree we have some work to do in this area, and the placement of the American flag is just one fairly recent example. I believe Maggie Reister has recognized this and is one of the reasons she is currently leading an effort to work on right relations. This effort deserves our support and, more importantly, requires our participation. One area I found particularly interesting was recognizing in Patrick's report was recognizing our unique identity and its strengths. There is much here for the congregation to work with, but in many ways it is lacking in clarity about itself as a religious community in its unique location and setting. And that's why Reverend Mark Morrison Reed's reading this morning really spoke to me and why I thought it should be included. Patrick lists 5 factors that lead to this assessment. A long and complicated history. And the complications in that history are the split back in the 70s, financially struggling at various times, making us less consistently viable in the community. And as I mentioned, some of these other maybe unresolved issues that have been with us over the years. The second thing is the generational changes brought about by the aging of the boomers in our congregations. Being a boomer myself, I know I'm in a lot different place than I was 20 years ago when I joined the church. We know fewer millennials attend churches these days, and the sandwich issues of the Gen X generation caring for their parents and also possibly still dependent children put further strains on their ability to attend and become involved in the church. And then in general, another societal change we see is a general decline in interest among the population, especially amongst millennials, in joining organized religions, making it harder to attract new members. The third challenge, but also a strength, is our geographic location of the members of the congregation, pulling mostly from 2 counties, Lake and Porter, but also occasionally from Newton or Pulaski County or even LaPorte County, and multiple cities within those 2 counties, Valparaiso, Chesterton, Hobart, other northern Lake counties, Hammond, St. John, and Dyer. People from all over Lake County and Porter County attend our church. Even the thriving metropolis of Hebron, Carla. But that can pose challenges as well. And also, it can be a strength, though, in our reaching out to members of the wider community. If we can convince them that that's something they would like to come check out. I think there are people across our entire footprint that we draw from that are interested in what we do. While there are still members that live within Hobart, a consequence of this diverse geographic membership is that there is minimal awareness of and contact with the immediate community around where the church building is located. We lack clarity about who the church's neighbors are and what needs they may have. We have an opportunity to connect with them if we want, and I will address that towards the end of this as well as some of these other subjects. One of our major strengths is that this congregation is a liberal religious beacon in a part of Indiana known for sundown towns, segregation, and economic inequality. We are strong advocates for marriage equality and LGBTQ+ rights, as well as supporters of Black Lives Matter, concerns for Indigenous peoples, the environment, workers' rights, and other progressive issues. He lifted up our participation in Beloved Conversations a few years back and the many public witness events and educational efforts that we have done over the years. The social action led by our Faith in Action community is most definitely a congregational strength and something that we should be very proud of and we should continue to support. Our last strength is our historical building. Patrick noted that it is in relatively good shape given its age, and I commend those who like our president, Tracy Farrell, Bob Allen, Patrick Chirilla, and many others, James Johnson, many others who over the years have worked hard to make sure that our building is in relatively good shape given its age. Patrick did note that the building could easily support a congregation of twice what we have now, which was roughly 80 members. So he believes we could easily support 150 to 160 members. And wouldn't that be a great thing for us to see? I also want to mention that two subjects that most congregations, so those are the 5 things for us to look at: the building, the liberal beacon and what we stand for, our geographic location, the complicated history, which will be coming up on our 150 year, and the generational changes that we're seeing. That some strengths, some challenges, but those are the 5 things he really talked about. So I also want to mention 2 subjects that most congregations our size without a minister face. And this was something he delved into quite a bit, and I'm not going to delve into it a lot here, but there are a few things I want to lift up about it. The first subject is our desire for a full-time settled minister, and the second subject is for larger membership. I want to address that latter subject first. Most congregations desire more membership, to have more hands to share in the work, and more pledgers and pledges to pay for it. But our congregation really lacks experience and an internalized understanding of the fundamental changes that growth brings to any congregation, because we've never had a really big spurt in growth. We've had some good, remember there was a period of time with Roger Bruin as our minister that we had pretty significant growth, and I think we maybe hit about 120 members, roughly, give or take. And that was probably one of the high points. That would have been a few years probably before Roger retired, but that was kind of one of the high points. But it wasn't a rapid growth because, a lot of churches grow when they basically have more people joining than leaving, because there's always an ebb and flow to a congregational membership. So that understanding of what a big growth spurt would bring is something we will have to learn about or come to grips with. And there could be a lot of changes that we'd have to adapt to. To continue on, though, with the first subject I mentioned, which is getting used to working with a full-time settled minister, is the desire is let me back up here, sorry. To continue on with that subject, getting a full-time minister, desire is understandable for the greater sense of stability one would bring, which is what I think we all desire. But congregations without experience of ever having a full-time minister, and really other than a handful of ministers, there's not too many members that go back to the last settled full-time minister we had, which was Barbara Edgecombe back in, I believe, it was the late 70s, early 80s. So it's quite a few years back. So most of us would not recognize that bringing in a full-time minister, while it might provide some short-term respite for lay leaders who are suffering from burnout and being on too many committees, will also necessitate fundamental changes to the church's system as it currently exists. To create more stability going forward in the long term will most likely necessitate change in the short term. Now, some of you may think, wow, that seems like an awful lot, and I'm not sure I'm really excited about that. And some of us, and I include myself in that, might think, yay, maybe some, real work to get done addressing some of these things, but it all depends on us. Finally, we received really good feedback on our use of outside sources like the UUA, our regional and district resources, as well as the transitions office. Many of our members have attended the General Assembly, UUA General Assemblies over the years, getting lots of information and resources. I know many of us, Tina and I included, love going to GA, and hopefully we'll look forward to doing that back in a live version here someday, although it won't be this year. So many of our members are aware of and participate in different UU interest groups and support groups. Tina, as a former staff member of Meadville Lombard Theological School, has helped the congregation with access to those resources. It's been very helpful in the search team that she leads. We've gotten some students to serve in our live pulpit, but also virtual pulpit. And as we've seen this past summer and fall, we've gotten some great previous Meadville Lombard Theological School students, now ministers, to be part of our virtual pulpit supply as well. A connection with the Indiana-based Center for Congregations, which I think was started by Maggie and maybe some others, allowed us to receive a grant to upgrade our technology and communications resources. And here I'd like to put a plug in for James. He helped out when we recently held my father, who'd passed away, as many of you know. We did a memorial service for him at the church, and James was there, stuck with me all day after the service. So I really appreciate that, James. Thank you so much. And I saw that setup, and it's like, wow, this is, first of all, it's very cool. There's cameras, there's a couple big screens, but I think it's a huge upgrade so that moving forward, whether we're doing services in the sanctuary or not, that we have a up-to-date, really cool technology and communication resource up in the balcony there that can handle a lot of things. So I think those of you that worked hard on that are to be commended. All these comments and observations add up to what most of us already know. We have a lot of good things going: the strength of our personal connections, the love for our community and our building, a strong commitment on issues of justice and equality. So, what are some of the recommendations that Patrick shared that could help us as we prepare to bring our imagined future to reality? There are several good ideas here, and probably more that we could add to the list for sure. The question for us to answer is, how do we prioritize that list? How do we, what is the question for us to answer is, how do we prioritize that list? What moves us forward in a way that most closely aligns with our shared values? Do we know what our shared values are? I recall the words I began with this morning from Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. If we take those words to heart, we can always overcome our differences, speak aloud about our concerns, safe in the knowledge that we can do so without sowing such a level of discord that we would ever split again. This report, that came from the end of Patrick's time here, is a gift that should be the beginning of a conversation that leads us to the future we desire. Here are some ways Patrick suggested we get started. Building renovation. As I mentioned earlier, the building is in pretty good shape, but there could be some work done in the basement, maybe a general facelift internally. I know that was a big thing. Patrick would walk around and look and see things, and I think there were some changes we saw internally and externally. And I know there was a lot of work done this fall with the spreading of mulch and cleaning up of the grounds. And I was sorry I wasn't able to participate in that, but from what I've seen the last time I was by there, things look beautiful, especially the two signs, the Black Lives Matter sign and the rainbow flag that is on the front of the church. I think it's very tastefully done. I think they're well placed, and that we shouldn't have to worry about any vandalism. And most importantly, I think it shows the community who we are and what we stand for. We also, Patrick also thinks that improved usefulness of the various spaces could lead to possibility for more robust rental. Oh, perfect, John. I love it. Thank you for putting that picture up. Isn't that beautiful? Thank you. you can put it back up there because this next one has something to do with that. Visible signage of our historically located building on the city's main downtown street. So I mentioned the two signs we see there, but how about, because we are a national historical, place register? I'm sure I got that wrong, but what would be wrong with putting a sign acknowledging that out front? I think it's a great idea. We also got the wayside pulpit, and we also have a sign announcing our services. So just having raising that visible signage to the community would be another good idea. While we're on that subject still, how about, as a part of this came out of part of the discussion of the flag in the sanctuary, why not erect a number of flag poles to display the American flag, maybe the Indiana state flag, maybe a rainbow flag, maybe I don't know if the UUA has an official flag, but putting that out maybe in the Memorial Garden with lights shining on it and saying, hey, here's who we are, here's what we stand for. He also suggested during festivals or outdoor events, I know we used to do it on the 4th of July parade, but then I think they changed the route on us. We would have a lemonade stand, but doing outside activities during those times, like festivals, that sort of thing, with either selling coffee or lemonade or that sort of thing, being more visible to the community. Okay, thank you, John. The next thing he suggested, and this is something I was a part of back in 2018, as was Jeff Keim, Steve Midmore, and Lori Eberhardt, we rewrote the bylaws that suggested that it's something we do every time we have an interim minister or contract minister. So it hasn't been done. And since it has been, I believe the bylaws say we should do it like every 2 or 3 years. So something we should probably take a look at again. Also, what he called a percept study of the congregation. I didn't know what that was, so I had to ask Tina to help me out on that. But basically, that's a demographic study of the areas of geographic interest, the areas that we pull from for our membership, but also look more to the immediate neighborhood around the church and also the city of Hobart, Lake County, and even the larger 3-county areas. So something, what do those areas need? How can we engage in? And I know there's been a lot of conversation, and I think this would be a great idea. And this was an idea of Patrick's too, and he mentioned it. It's not actually in the report, but he mentioned it verbally, is, looking to engage with the community of Gary in ways that I think could lead us to much deeper connection with those with the members of that community. And we show up for the Black Lives Matter, but then it's kind of like, what's next? What's the next step after that? Find additional revenue streams. He mentioned possibly turning fixed capital or capital assets into operationally available sources of regular income. I'm not sure what he meant there, but I'm sure we could get clarification. But what he did mention is possibly buying the property behind us to the east, or to the east, and turning that into possible rental space with the rather significant amount of money that's already been contributed for that effort, and or pledged specifically for that acquisition. So something else for us to consider. Just a couple of more topics here. Direct outreach to the community, the immediate community, by offering services or programs for children and families. What do the families around our church need? Do they have youngsters at school that could maybe use a after-school tutoring program or something like that? Check with the schools, check with service agencies for what would most be needed or desired. Maybe do some door-to-door canvassing of area homes about what people are seeking to make their lives better in that community. And what are they looking for in a religious or service community? And the last thing he mentioned, and I know, I believe we still have members that have been involved with this, but publicly offering the OWL program. OWL stands for Our Whole Lives, which is a sexual education program for, I believe it's middle schoolers, where they feel free and open to discuss questions that they have. And I think in today's society, it's important conversations to have, and important, especially when you have people in Congress posting signs saying, you know, it's a man and a woman, and that's what science says. Our crazy new rep from Georgia. But anyway, I think that's a great idea, and something that we could do that would, again, raise the level of awareness in the community around us. To this list of 8 things that Patrick mentioned, I would add that we explore ways to strengthen our financial position by focusing on increasing the size of our general endowment fund. It's not something we typically talk about. We've never had a organized effort to grow our endowment. It's nice when we get contributions to it, but most churches have at least if not an annual, maybe a biannual effort to do a fund drive for their general endowment, which is a way to secure our future financially. I think making a big deal out of our 150-year anniversary coming up in, I believe it's 2024, would be part of what we could do around the endowment as well, just as a way to ask members of the wider community to ensure that we're going to be around for another 150 years. I believe it's a good idea to reach out to past members to invite them back to join in that 150th anniversary celebration. And I know this list could go on, but in the interest of ending the service at a halfway decent time, let me leave you with this. I believe by the end of this year, we will be able to gather together like we used to before the pandemic hit. Just my opinion. I hope it's true. I'm also optimistic that we will do so under the leadership of a full-time minister, and that those 2 things alone will energize this congregation in a way we haven't seen in several years. Our challenges will not have disappeared, but our strengths and some newly discovered ones will be here to help us write a new chapter in the nearly 150-year history of this congregation. It will be driven by those of us in the communities we represent. There is much work to be done in our congregation, in our wider community, our country, and the world. It is work worth doing. Again, I return to the words of Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Let's bring the future we desire into existence. May it be so, and blessed be. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And as we consider imagining our future as a congregation, as a society, let's also consider the ways we can give with ourselves and our pocketbooks. So now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The PayPal link is on the screen, but is not clickable. A clickable link will be shared in the chat box. Thank you. Join with me now in singing the Fire of Commitment. The words will be on your screen. There they are.
From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon bright and clean, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion make to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the light of liberty. Fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then the promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our closing words are from number 560 in the back of the hymnal. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run
Join with me as we extinguish the chalice, reading the words that are printed on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for joining us today. I believe that John will be unmuting everyone, and so we can have coffee hour, unmoderated coffee hour. Why does that?